Hello, Dan. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jonathan?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining the GCCM podcast. How's everything in Washington, D.C.?
Um, Good. We had the big inauguration yesterday, so the country's turning a page in the history books, and we're looking forward to seeing what the Biden administration has in store, especially for climate change, which seems like a lot. So that's good.
Indeed, yeah, a lot of headlines about climate action. So we will see.
Yeah.
Of course, you've had a good history with GCCM, you yourself, and also Catholic Climate Covenant. But I wanted to start with talking about kind of how you found your way into this work at all. I was reading where you had volunteered years ago with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and even before then, did you grow up in a Catholic household that was kind of committed to service, or what? Where was the kind of start on your journey?
Yeah. Well, I did grow up Catholic, with the exception of kindergarten and first grade. My entire education was Catholic, from grade school to high school to college to graduate school. But my family was certainly, obviously Catholic. But I kind of got my start in kind of the Catholic social teaching arena, when I took a course at Xavier University when I went to college there, on Catholic social thought. And the professor, a Jesuit by the name of Ben Ermston, was pretty influential in setting me on a different path. I was a business major at Xavier because I didn't know what else to do. And I guess it was fall semester of my junior year is when I took that course, and it sort of shifted my worldview pretty dramatically. And from there, I saw this brochure in the student center at Xavier about the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. I had been a commuter to school, so I was living at home, going to college, and come senior year, I was trying to find the place that's furthest from Cincinnati, but still in the U.S., and that turned out to be Fairbanks, Alaska. So that's where I went for my Jesuit Volunteer Corps year of service. So that's kind of how it started, and then from there, with the values of JVC and serving Native communities in Alaska, that just sort of affirmed that for me that's where I wanted to spend my time and energy.
Mm-hmm. And the class was Jesuit thought. What was the class exactly?
Catholic social teaching, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
What clicked in that class then? What did you get exposed to that made you think kind of like, wow, this is my path, or I want to learn more about this, or?
Yeah. Well, I remember a couple of things, but one in particular. So I was a Boy Scout, so maybe that explains part of my attraction to nature. But and I was an Eagle Scout, and at the end of that class year of Eagle Scouts, we all were invited by the local Boy Scout Council for Cincinnati, the greater Cincinnati area, to come to a meeting to honor us for that class. And the speaker was the head of Westinghouse. So I was very impressed. We got the chairman of Westinghouse come to talk to us Boy Scouts. In the class, my forward about 6-7 years, and in the class at Xavier, I learned that Westinghouse was operating a nuclear power plant on an active volcano. I'm sorry, on an active earthquake fault in the Philippines. And I thought to myself, well, I met the chairman of Westinghouse years ago. I don't think he would do that.
Yeah.
So it was, sort of taking the naivete out of my eyes and realizing that, there's certainly, there's another side to business, I guess. And so that, and learning about local issues in Cincinnati. Father Ben was great about bringing in guest speakers and talking about low-income communities in Cincinnati that I never had been exposed to before, and some of the struggles that they had. And so just a lot of things like that in that class sort of opened my eyes to a lot of the injustices in our world.
And was there anything in particular that made you feel compelled to act on it? Because a lot of people in your class probably thought, oh yeah, that this shouldn't be happening, or we should do something, but they maybe didn't. They kept with business degree, or kept with whatever. Didn't go become as active as you did right away.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I don't know if at the same time, I guess maybe the other piece of this was I did our parish in Cincinnati had a program. It was like it's one of these like Christ Renews His Parish programs. It's one of these parish wide um, efforts to help us as Catholics understand our faith a little deeper. And it was an immersion experience. I mean, immersion in the sense that we were in the cafeteria for a couple of nights, sleeping on cots, and all men, just trying to figure out what our path in life is going to be. And I think that probably had an influence as well. When you start to hear other people's stories and dive a little deeper into our faith, I'm old enough to remember that, a lot of our faith formation was the Baltimore Catechism, and that was kind of it. But all of a sudden I realized that there's a lot more depth to our faith, dove into scripture a little bit more. And I think, I also at Xavier, we were required at the time, all students were required to take 4 semesters of theology and 4 semesters of philosophy. And so I kind of dove into those subjects. I found those very appealing. So I think those combination of things helped me to sort of shift from this business track that I was in to something that was a little bit more in keeping with where my heart was telling me to go.
hmm What did you take away from the experience in Alaska then? It sounds fascinating.
Well, my wife, for one.
There you go. Well noted. An important thing to note, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, the Jesuit Volunteer Corps dating service, as they call it. Yeah, so I met her my first. When I was there for 2 years. I was a volunteer for 1, and then worked for the same organization the second year. So we started dating then, which was fun. Then my job was kind of an unusual job for JBC. Most of the time, it's pretty much direct service. My job was kind of twofold. Our house that was in the same grounds as the Chancery office, and it was a big house, and so we had extra bedrooms. And I was sort of, I guess you'd say, a hotel manager, because priests and nuns from the bush, as they call it, from the rural parts of Alaska would come into town for meetings, and we'd house them and feed them and make sure they had clean beds and all those kinds of things. And then the second part of the job was to help a Jesuit, 2 Jesuits and a Dominican sister, run a program that they called the Center for Theology and Spirituality, which was a program to try to help Native Alaskans embrace the church, but also generate vocations. So through a series of workshops and retreats, the goal was to help the Native communities understand their culture and how that culture can add texture to their Catholic faith. So you get some people who go through that experience through, say, a weekend workshop, and then they do a week-long retreat, and then they eventually, become a deacon or a sister or a priest. And so that was the goal of that program. So I did quite a bit of travel for that, to kind of witness what was happening with that program, as well as kind of the administrative end of that program. So it was great, because I got to see a lot of the interior of Alaska. I was able to also spend a few months in a village on the Bering Sea, so that was quite eye-opening to see how people live day to day in that environment, Native Alaskans. So it was just a wonderful, and then of course my community as well. There were 4 of us volunteers that year, and to learn how to live with people you've never met before. And we'd have mass when Father Peterson was in town. We'd have mass and every day, and we'd cook together, we'd laugh together, we'd cry together. We'd, all of those things that happen within a community. So, and then my faith was also deepened. Then I started praying the office every day, and uh, trying to figure out how to live on $60 a month. So that whole simple living aspect of JVC. So it was really a wide, eye-opening experience for me.
Hmm. In what ways was your faith deepened then? You said you started praying in the office every day?
Oh, praying the hours.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And your connection with creation, then obviously now you have that with Catholic Climate Covenant, or your work is more explicitly in that. But so at the time you're kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to work for justice and work with that. When along your pathway did it kind of veer into, doing good for creation, protecting creation with the justice in mind, of course?
Um, it happened late in my career, I would say. I was working with the bishop. I had been working at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I was there for 11 years. I had two jobs while I was there. The first was to be a policy advisor on a number of issues: criminal justice, environment, the death penalty, and for a time, food programs. Um, so I learned a lot about the kind of environmental issues through that policy position. And then I was director of diocesan relations for the last 5 years I was there, which was basically trying to take the teachings or the policy work that was coming out of our department, the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development, and make it relevant and actionable, I guess, for diocesan peace and justice directors. Um, so I learned a lot about the environment then, and I began to learn about this issue of climate change. Um, Around that same time, somewhere in there, my oldest son Ben um, was always into the outdoors, even as a toddler, and he saw a local stream that needed cleaning up, and we didn't, neither my wife or I prompted this at all, but he just wanted to clean some of the trash out of the stream, so we helped him organize some friends to do that. And it struck me that this young, he's probably like 6 or 7 years old, young boy was distraught, I guess, about this trash that was in this part of our neighborhood. And I don't know, that just kind of stuck with me. I was ready to move on from the Bishops' Conference after about 10 years, and so I started talking to my old boss, John Carr, about that, and he and the head of the National Religious Partnership for the Environment, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is a member of that partnership. He and the head of that came to me and said, 5 years ago, the bishops wrote this statement on climate change in 2001, and nobody knows about it. What if we set you up with a separate organization outside the Bishops' Conference to focus just on that issue? And so that's really how it started. And I jumped at the chance to do that, because I'd already built up the connections that I would need to do that job within the Catholic community, both nationally and locally. And so that's how it started.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Your son, though, kind of led you to that path without even the path existing, I guess.
Yeah.
Just to go back to that, it's an interesting story. So this is a stream nearby your home then?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And you all were walking past, and he thought, hey, Dad, we should clean this up. But there's some reason that stuck with you too.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. He wanted to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what about it stuck with you? Just that he would want to do that, or that you had walked past it a million times before, or what exactly?
Well, I guess at the time I was saying, trying to look through his eyes, like, he saw things that shouldn't be there, just styrofoam and cups and paper and plastic and other kinds of trash, and that bothered him for whatever reason. So trying to look through his eyes and thinking, wow, if this young person can see what we ignore, maybe we ought to be paying attention to it too. So I don't know, just something about it stuck with me, and I was able to help him act on that, and then that whole lesson sort of from out of the out of the mouths of babes, as they say, comes some wisdom. So I think that's what struck me about it.
And did you, once that happened, you help them clean up the stream, your family does. Did you
Mm-hmm.
think from then you thought, I should get more into this work, or did it kind of, you set it aside and go about, you know what I mean? Or did you, was
No,
that,
no, it definitely stuck with me. And when I was thinking of leaving the bishops' conference, I had learned enough about climate change to know that, and with that experience with my son, as well as all of the learning that I had done through the policy position that I was in, um, and the work that I did at the USCCB, I think I began to realize that this is where I'd like to move. My next career move ought to be in this um, environmental arena. So I was informational interviewing with all of the big environmental groups in town, seeing if they had any openings. When John Carr and Paul Gorman, the head of NRPE, came to me and asked me to do this.
gotcha, okay. The interesting thing too about Catholic Climate Covenant is you all have always, maybe not always, but it's in the tagline now, of course, care for creation and care for the poor. That
Yeah,
there's always been that connection, right? Why is that, and how did that always come about, or how has that been there since the start?
yeah, it's been there because that's who we are. You know, my old boss used to say, we're not the Sierra Club at prayer. We are first Catholic, and then we're environmentalists, and so I think the notion that this isn't just about polar bears; it's also about people, is something I think that really resonated with me. We know it's we know that low income communities are particularly hard hit by a number of things, including environmental degradation and climate change. You just have to look at a typhoon or a hurricane or a massive flood or a wildfire, and the people who are most impacted by that, who have the least resources to recover from something like that, are poor and low income communities. And so, that's who we are as people of faith. We care about the least and the lost and the lonely. And so, those are the folks that ought to demand our attention as we grapple with this issue of climate change as well.
Mm-hmm. There's two good lines there too. We're not Sierra Club at prayer, and
Yeah.
it's not only about polar bears; it's about people
Right.
as well. So,
Right.
um,
Right.
I'm always interested in how people kind of nurture their relationship with creation on a regular basis. Of course, what do you do to make sure that you do stay connected with creation? That it's not. We can all stay busy at our computers, even
Yeah.
in this work. Obviously, how do you make sure that your work is grounded in that?
Yeah. Well, get outside regularly. When people ask what's the one thing that I can do to understand this more, I say get outside. Go out and be in nature and marvel at the beauty of this creation. It doesn't matter where you live. There's always, even if you live in an urban center, there are always trees and small parks to be found, and just take a look at that, take that in, take in the beauty of creation and the wonder of all of the different species and landscapes and so forth that we have. So I get out and hike, and I like to bike ride. So I get to bike through some nice rural communities in our area. Um, and I have a couple of kayaks, so I get out on the water and paddle around, and so I find just any opportunity I can, if the weather's decent, to be outside and enjoy nature.
And do you find a way to, I mean, kind of spiritually enjoy nature, maybe pray outside, things like
Oh,
that, or
sure,
like
yeah.
attend services or attend mass or
Yeah, definitely. I we go to our local church, although not currently, but we watch it on Zoom. But yeah, definitely. There's occasionally as we're walking through the woods, or if I'm doing a solo hike, just to sit either deep in the woods to just look at what's around me at my feet, or if we can get to a hilltop and look out, see see the beauty of creation that way, and definitely meditate on that. I mean, that's a big part of the joy of being out in nature is to kind of meditate and pray about this creation. Early on, getting into this climate change work, you begin to look at things differently, I think. And so early on, as I was forming this organization, I was just frankly depressed because I'm looking at what's around us and saying, how much longer are these trees, these deciduous trees in Maryland, how much longer are they going to be able to survive if the temperatures keep warming up? Maybe we're going to have palm trees here someday, not too distant future. And so, but eventually I think you have to kind of let go of that and just say, I have to do my part. And I've been given this opportunity to help the Catholic Church understand and act on this issue of climate change. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on just doing the best job that I can with the skills that I have.
Mm-hmm. But how do you, that's an interesting point you bring up, because it can be overwhelming, of course, for anyone in any kind of justice work, but especially with the climate crisis of late. How do you intentionally kind of push that away and maybe get more focused in on, here's what I can do, and one step kind of at a time, one foot in front of the other, to use the metaphor?
Yeah. I was probably doing this job about 3 or 4 years, and had a retreat with the partners of the National Religious Partnership for the Environment. So those are the Catholic community, mainline Protestant community, the Jewish community, and the evangelical community. So we were invited to do this retreat with all of the staff of these different partners and some other folks who we were connected with in our own communities. And the Jesuit John Coleman was there to help guide the retreat. John's a retired professor from the University of San Francisco. And at the end of the retreat, actually one of the evangelical leaders raised his hand and said, what if we're not successful? What if we can't stop climate change? What if we do end up cooking the planet? And John Coleman had a very interesting answer. He said, I don't think that's the right question. I think the question is, were we faithful? Were we, were we doing all that we can to take care of God's creation? And in the end, we have to leave it to God. It's in God's hands, but God works through us. So I think that moment gave me some release. I can't single-handedly solve this crisis, but what I can do is educate the Catholic community and provide them tools and resources for them to act once they begin to learn about the gravity of this situation. So so I think that just trying to be faithful to our tradition was kind of a key moment for me. So I don't feel like I'm pushing it aside, but I'm trying to have perspective that ultimately, we have to rely on God's grace and allow God to work through us to do what we can at this moment.
Mm-hmm. And that idea that you're not in control of everything, of course, as well.
That's right.
So, yeah. What is most exciting to you about the work you all are doing this year in 2021?
Yeah, so I think the most exciting thing is working with you all, with the Global Catholic Climate Movement, on the Vatican's Laudato Si action plan. So we've been charged to be the hub in the United States to do that effort. So that's demanding a lot of our attention, but it's also very exciting. We have a lot of really good partners to help with that.
Very good. And I think maybe I was on a Laudato Si Week webinar, something along those lines, where you talked about Catholic Energies program and the great work that is happening. It's a really interesting program. If you want to just share it for people who might not be familiar with it, but just talk about the work you all are doing there and how it would work if someone is interested.
Happy to. So about the time, maybe a year before Laudato Si came out, I was trying to solve 2 problems at once. One problem was money. How do we get revenue into the covenant? Because we're always, like you guys, we're always trying to fundraise. And secondly, how do we answer the question that I would get pretty frequently when I give talks on this issue is, at the end of a conversation, someone will raise their hand and they'll say, you know what, I can't get my pastor to talk about this. I can't get my bishop to do anything on this. And I think, a lot of that has to do with this uniquely American issue of it's become an ideological issue. The climate has. And so pastors and bishops are still somewhat reluctant to talk about this because they feel like they might upset members of their congregation for getting into, a political issue. And it's not a political issue. It is a political issue, but it's more a moral issue and a scientific issue. So, in trying to answer that question, I kind of went back to my community organizing days, and I thought, what's in the self-interest of a pastor or a bishop or a principal or the head of a hospital system? And often it's money. How can we save money? So I knew at that point that there's a lot of money to be saved by doing just simple energy efficiency projects and renewable energy projects. And so I started talking with some folks in the area and got hooked up with a guy named Dan Last, who helped to guide and is now kind of the primary, his company is the primary company that helps us manage the Catholic Energies program. So we started that program by providing a service to Catholic institutions to do, for example, LED retrofits. Let's take out your incandescents or your compact fluorescent lighting, and let's replace that with LED lighting. A lot of communities, the local utility provides incentives to do that kind of energy conservation work. So we started that in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. We knew the Archbishop. We had a great relationship with the Peace and Justice Director. The facilities manager had a net zero home, so he got this stuff.
Very nice.
So we started there, and then in exchange for bringing these vendors, these companies to the Catholic market, which is huge. There must be 70 to 100,000 buildings owned by the U.S. or owned by the Catholic Church just in the U.S. We thought, they can give us a little finder's fee, if you will, for bringing this market to them. We have the connections to the market. They need an entree. So in exchange for us giving them that business or helping them develop that business, they're going to give us a little bit of money. So that's how that was the revenue part of this. So that has evolved into focus pretty much on solar energy. We still do LED retrofits, but the market is demanding solar. So a lot of Catholic parishes and Catholic institutions want to do solar. They want to produce their own energy. So we've developed, the program is pretty much focused on developing solar projects for the Catholic community around the country. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you should have seen, I would imagine that this year would be bigger than last year for that program, and last year was bigger than the prior year as the solar market just grows and grows and grows. So
it definitely has grown. Yeah, and then obviously to close the loop on that, which is something I forgot to say. So as we're developing these solar and energy efficiency projects for Catholic institutions, we provide them with a menu of educational opportunities. So while you're doing this, it's good to educate your parishioners or your students or the parents of your students or the retreatants that come to your retreat center or the wider community. We're not doing this just because it looks nice. It looks good to have a solar array on your rooftop. We're doing this because it's part of who we are as Catholics. So,
yeah, everything is connected. So.
Everything is connected, exactly.
Very good, Dan. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Jonathan.
Have a good rest of your week.